Good evening, everyone. Evening where I am. I see I have someone watching. Gordon Coffee coming live and unscripted once again. It's now just before midnight, 11:59 on this 20th day of January 2024. And Candy, as always, is bugging me. Oh, hey, do it in order. Give me your paw. Right in. Speak. There we go. That takes care of Candy. As always, thank you for the likes and subscriptions. You may be wondering about the cowboy hat. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But what I'm talking about tonight is some sad news, tragic news. A gentleman by the name of Mike Dixon, who's a journalist who covers the world of tennis, passed away within the last day or two down in Australia. He was covering the Australian Open, which is underway right now, one of the Grand Slams, one of the major tennis tournaments. And he, according to a tweet put out by his wife, he collapsed and died suddenly at the Australian Open while he was there covering it. And why am I talking about this? Well, this same Mike Dixon took extreme, he wrote a lot about Novak Djokovic 2 years ago at the Australian Open when Novak Djokovic was deported from Australia because he refused to get the COVID vaccination. And this journalist was waxing all, I guess he thought he was a medical expert or something, citing, basically just being a mouthpiece for the pharmaceutical industry and our government health officials that were pushing this pharmaceutical product on everyone and engaging in what I consider to be illegal coercive measures, such as no jab, no job, no jab, no travel, no jab, you can't take your kid to hockey, basketball, baseball, whatever. It's still something that eats at me. And there's a German word that is used in English. English is a bastard language. We'll borrow any word from any other language if it works. And the word is Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. I should write it out. Schadenfreude. I'll put it in the chat, live chat, if anyone wants to look it up. Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. It means the malicious enjoyment of another's misfortune. And I have to admit, I'm guilty as charged. It's not a positive thing to take malicious enjoyment in another's misfortune. But if I'm being honest with myself, payback's a bitch. We've seen this so many times with individuals, prominent individuals like this Mike Dixon, who have a platform, who use their platform to shame and ridicule and mock anyone who had the temerity to refuse the COVID vaccines. And I use the word vaccine very loosely, because the definition that I have read for vaccine is an agent or causative substance which confers immunity. Vaccinations are alternately called immunizations. And when you are immunized against something, you don't get it. And everyone I know, 90 plus % of the people I know who have had the COVID jabs have still gotten sick with COVID. I never knew anyone who received an MMR shot, measles, mumps, rubella. I never knew a single person inoculated against those diseases to get those diseases. I never have known a single person who was immunized against polio who got polio. I don't want this to denigrate into a rant, but I'm feeling it coming on. I genuinely, this man left behind a wife. He's left behind at least one child, and that is tragic. But we've seen this so often. There was a physician, a doctor, I believe from New Brunswick. It was from the east coast of Canada. Young man, 46, 7 years of age, saying, I have no patience, let them all die if they don't want to get the shot, da, da, da. And that gentleman passed away. And we've seen this repeatedly. And those of us who did refuse the COVID vaccines, we look at this and we feel a certain degree of vindication when we see this. And no doubt I'm not the only one experiencing this sentiment of schadenfreude, of maliciously enjoying. You might have seen that comedian who talked about having the COVID vaccine and the shingles vaccine and this vaccine. And she said, well, I guess Jesus loves me best. And then proceeded to pass out on stage almost basically immediately after that little bit and cracked her skull, actually suffered a fractured skull when her cranium hit the stage. And it was like schadenfreude again. That'll teach you. The reason I put this hat on is that during what I call the COVID era, the era of COVID insanity, I was one of those individuals who, as much as I was able, lived as normal a life as possible. I found churches that were gathering in defiance of public health orders, and were showing that the science was not science. I mean, I did a video recently talking about the fact that Anthony Fauci has recently come out and admitted that there was no science behind social distancing. I had that figured out in April 2020. I wrote a little missive on my social media platforms. I wrote it in two. I did in an investor forum that I was engaging with at that time, and on my Facebook. I cut and paste. I wrote it on the investor forum, and then I cut and pasted and put it onto my Facebook page. And I basically said, we're turning up the world upside down so that dear Uncle Joe can have another 3 months of diaper changes in the nursing home. Really? And a family member reading it on Facebook asked me to take it down. And I did. I took it down off Facebook, but I kept it up on the investor forum. One day I may do a video and read what I wrote. It was harsh, but I could see right from the beginning that things were insane. And by the spring, by April, May of 2020, and I'm not taking credit for having come up with it organically. I didn't have the idea myself, but I was reading commentary from across the spectrum, and people were starting to talk about a mandatory vaccine being forced on people. And it just made logical sense to me that the way they were reporting on the development, this warp speed development of the COVID jabs, it struck me as more than plausible, and I anticipated it and started writing about it on my Facebook page. And lo and behold, as we all know, by September, they were saying it was basically a slam dunk that it was going to be approved or at least authorized. They called it an emergency use authorization in the United States. In Canada, it was called an interim authorization. And I knew it was going to be forced. And when it comes to an individual like Novak Djokovic, I have such enormous respect for this man. Full disclosure, I'm a bit of a tennis fan. I got into tennis during the Bjorn Borg, John McEnroe era, and I never liked Djokovic. I never, the big three in tennis are Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer, and Novak Djokovic, and he was number three out of those big stars. I did not like the man. I found him too machine-like. I liked Roger Federer was grace and style. Rafael Nadal was power and passion, and Novak Djokovic was too much a robotic, like a machine. Did not like him, but I tell you, he has gone up so much in my estimation for the stance that he took, and I'm somewhat jealous because myself, once the jabs were authorized in Canada, right around the beginning of December of 2020, I knew I was in the military, and I knew they would be forced. I didn't need a crystal ball for that. I could see it coming, and they'd done it before with previous inoculations, made them mandatory. And so I knew it was coming, and there was no way I was going to take a pharmaceutical product that had been rushed through at warp speed. Anthony Housefeather, who is a parliamentarian and a former parliamentary secretary under Justin Trudeau's Liberals, during committee hearings that are available on YouTube. I've done a video previously reading the transcript of what he said and how any parliamentarian wanting to see the contracts that the government of Canada signed with Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, or AstraZeneca, anyone who wants to see these contracts is required to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And he was being grilled principally by members of the Conservative Party over why can't Canadians know what's in the contracts? And he said, well, because we were asking the pharmaceutical companies to do something they've never done before. We were exposing them to enormous risk by having them put a product onto the market before it had been thoroughly tested. And you think I'm going to take this shot? However, where I have so much respect for Novak Djokovic is the fact that he pushed back, he fought against it, and he was trying to play in the Australian Open in 2022, 2 years ago, and thought he had an exemption, thought they were going to let him play, but they ended up deporting him. With myself, once the jabs were authorized, I put in for my release. I asked to leave voluntarily from the Canadian Armed Forces because I knew it would be forced. I could have, as did Novak Djokovic, it's totally different scope, but I could have fought for an exemption, but I wasn't willing to put my bodily autonomy up on the auction block for some bureaucrat to arbitrarily decide, no, exemption denied. So I put in my release, and in June of 2021, that release was granted. I did it before the shots were mandated. So the reason I left the military isn't because I was refusing to take a mandated shot. They didn't become mandated in the Canadian Armed Forces until September or October of 2021. But if I'd waited, and if they had refused, then I would have been forced into a situation of having to say that I'm leaving the military because I'm refusing to take a shot that is required. It could be seen in some respect of refusing a lawful order. And I didn't. We all have to pick our battles, but I sometimes regret not having more the courage of my convictions, as it were. I'm far from perfect. And I've suffered for having refused. It's cost me relationships. It's cost me my former employment. It's the relationships bother me more. The manner in which there was an article published, front page of the Toronto Star, one of the largest daily circulated papers in Canada, and they in big bold type on their front page said, yeah, I had a bunch of invectives against people like myself who refused the COVID jabs, saying, I don't care if they die, let them suffer, take away everything from them, and it was disgusting. Getting back to my hat, during this COVID era, what I did was, I'm wearing a shirt right now. It says "Enough is enough," and underneath it says "Open up small businesses now." I got that at a rally in Peterborough in, I think it was March, April of 2021, when all this insanity was going on. And I'm one who, I participate actively in social media, principally on Facebook. I'm an old guy. I don't do Instagram. I don't do Parler or Telegram or these other ones. Facebook is pretty much it. But I'm fully aware that a lot of the profiles and a lot of the people you meet with, for all you know, they could be a Russian bot. And nowadays they could be AI, they could be artificial intelligence. And I always wanted to meet up with the people I was interacting with online. And so I would say, if you're going to Peterborough, look for me. I'll be that 6-footish tall guy wearing a brown leather cowboy hat. And this became something of my almost calling card during the COVID era. There was a church I went to over 300 kilometers away from where I live, and I went there 7-8 times. I mean, you talk about saying to all the regulations. I mean, I went to this church, this faith community that was gathering down in southwestern Ontario, near London, Ontario. I went there 7-8 times, and I even stayed overnight with members of the congregation. Such wonderful people. Invited myself and my family in. Come on in, stay with us. And remember the context that this was happening under, when everyone else was, well, not everyone else. When I went down to southwestern Ontario, there were 700-800, maybe even 1,000 people there. When I went to Whitby, they had the Democracy Fund hosted an event at a college in Whitby in an indoor auditorium with, there were 700-800 people there. We were hugging, shaking hands, laughing, getting right in, embracing, and showing the science for what the science was. We're all supposed to be getting horribly sick and dying. No, we didn't. We're all fine. And I'm sorry that Mike Dixon has died, but I can't help but acknowledging this feeling of Schadenfreude, this feeling that you got what you deserved. Payback's a bitch. To me, it's almost like mocking God. And like with that comedian, God loves me best. Boom. Skull cracked. I would love to see payback for this. Sadly, I'll end it off by saying that right now in Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum is meeting. The president of Argentina has garnered some press over having gone off script and is promoting the virtues of market capitalism as being the best means by which to improve the lives of ordinary average citizens on the planet. That runs counter to Klaus Schwab and his evil little minions' new paradigm of, they call it stakeholder capitalism. My take on stakeholder capitalism, they're the capitalists, we're the stakes. They want to hold us. They want to have us under constant scrutiny, have us in a surveillance state. Anyway, that's going on right now. And one of the big topics of conversation is what they are calling disease X. X meaning some unknown, as yet undefined disease. But there was an article today in, oh, I forget what publication, but it was in the mainstream, saying that the next pandemic, it's only a matter of when, not if. Like, it's coming at us right around the corner. And they're calling it Disease X. And they're saying that there are, oh, I forget exactly how many, but they're saying there are 25, 30, something like that, families of viruses. Like, we know that coronaviruses include SARS, both the original SARS and SARS-CoV-2, MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory System, the common cold. These are all coronaviruses, and there are other families of viruses, and there are about 20 to 30 families. And what they're saying is that they're going to be endeavoring, or they're going to put together programs to start developing vaccines for broad-based family groups of viruses. They're going to start doing it, almost immediately, so that when the next pandemic comes, they'll be able to have a vaccine ready even faster. And if you're not reading up on this, you should. And further to that, there was a document called the 2005 International Health Regulations, and the 2005 International Health Regulations, they made the World Health Organization made it basically an advisory position, advising countries like Canada, the United States, Western Europe, signatory nations to this IHR. It made the World Health Organization an advisor. However, as we saw, such as with Sweden, countries were not obligated to abide or to follow the recommendations of the World Health Organization. Well, now they've gone and they've updated these international health regulations. And from what I understand, the document is now finished. Rather than guidelines, rather than suggestions, now signatory nations would be mandated to follow the whatever Dr. Tedros and his World Health Organization colleagues deem appropriate. They can Tedros unilaterally at this point, or whoever the chair of the World Health Organization is, that individual can unilaterally declare a world health emergency. And then once that declaration is made, then leaning on this updated IHR, International Health Regulations document, to which Canada is a signatory and most countries in the world will likely be, then it's no longer advice. Now it's mandated. And how it's enforced, I don't know, but it's all part of this globalist agenda, the ultimate objective of which is to erase national boundaries and to have humanity, whatever is left of us. I mean, Canada, our life expectancy rate for the last 3 years has been going down, never happened before in this nation's history. Our life expectancy has constantly been going up. Then sometime around 2021 or so, our life expectancy is now going down. And it's my firm and fixed belief that the ultimate objective of this Great Reset, Agenda 2030, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and everything else are all kinds of names to this globalist agenda. But the ultimate goal is to have the vast majority of humanity, whatever is left of us, as basically the digital property of our corporate masters. And government would be there just to hold our collective leash. But getting back, wrapping it up with what happened in Australia, Novak Djokovic deserves a lot of credit because he was lambasted by this journalist, and he showed a lot of class. He just very simply The announcement was using Mike Dixon's own Twitter account. His wife wrote, "We are devastated to announce that our wonderful husband and dad, Mike, has collapsed and died while in Melbourne for the Australian Open. For 38 years, he lived his dream covering sport all over the world. He was a truly great man, and we will miss him terribly. Lucy, Sam, Ruby, and Joe." And in replying to that tweet, Novak Djokovic wrote, "Condolences to Mike Dixon family. Prayer emoji. Rest in peace." Class. You reap what you sow. And looks like what happened to Mike Dixon and has happened to so many others. Canada, we have the new shot out now. It became available October of 2023, and public health officials and everyone urging everyone to get it. And only 15% of Canadians have done so. Bravo. And I suspect that a large chunk of that 15% are probably individuals living in long-term care, hospice, nursing home type situations. Sadly, people in God's waiting room, close to 90% of the patient population in long-term care in Ontario suffer from cognitive impairment. They're not, and I bet you a very large, significant chunk of that 15% who have had dose number 8, I think we're up to now. Anyway, sorry for rambling on. I'll keep it under half an hour. God bless. Thank you for watching. And as always, appreciate the engagement. I appreciate the comments. I especially appreciate everyone who's subscribed. I've gone over 160 now for a miserable, pathetic, unmonetized channel. No production value, just my dining room with my overhead light. That's why you can't see my face. That's why I go into the shadows when I put on my old COVID cowboy hat. I might keep it around. I might, when I'm doing something on COVID, I might put this on. Like I say, it became something of my COVID calling card. But just think, 2 years ago, what was going on? That was when Djokovic was deported from Australia for daring to try and play tennis without a rushed warp speed vaccine. And then wasn't long after that the Ottawa convoy started, which is what basically got me doing these videos. That's when I started doing these videos 2 years ago, because that was infuriating. The misinformation, the lies that were being promulgated by our government officials, by our media, by the tech companies, the Googles. For what it's worth, just to put a fine point on this, Mike Dixon passed away. Am I suggesting that it had anything to do with the fact? Nope. I leave it as simply a possibility. I know that that correlation does not prove causation, but absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. You have to look. God bless. Thank you. I got 3 thumbs up already. Thanks very much. A little bit rambly, but a lot better than yesterday's. Anyway, we'll talk to you again in probably maybe tomorrow or within the next day or two. God bless.